So I don't know if you guys know, but mine are like excerpts. The one that I'm reading from is not like a novel, a storyline. It's several different stories about things. So I'm just going to go ahead and take like little breaks in between, but I'll just read them straight through. Okay. I guess since we were already kind of discussing Alzheimer's, I'll start with the one that's kind of referencing Alzheimer's. My brain is eating away at me. Everyone is just standing around watching me spiral out of control, completely oblivious to the chess pieces moving out of place that are triggering me because they're too busy blaming me for the things I don't even know I'm doing. Everything falls apart whenever I'm not alone. When there's just me, I can breathe. I can figure it all out. Trying to make things better always makes them worse. And every time I think I've lost everything I could possibly lose, when I think I've run out of collateral, life proves me wrong and strips me of something else. I feel like I'm describing an abysmal lifetime, and yet these are only memories from last year. So that was one. And my next one. Okay. I don't sell tickets. This isn't an exhibit. This isn't an addiction for you to kick, a habit for you to quit. I'm not a destination or some backpacking exploration. I'm not another scratch on your bedpost, another notch on your belt. I don't belong in your photo album. I don't fit into any of your narratives. You weren't here long enough. You don't even know me at all. You came and you saw, but you didn't conquer, and you never will. Because this town isn't new to people like you. I can recognize a tourist from a mile away. You thought you knew all the right things to say. You thought you'd come in and I'd let you stay. So of course, I invited you in. You looked around and touched everything. You took pictures and posted every time we kissed. You linked locations and revisited places I took you to and reminisced. And suddenly your backpack turned into luggage. Your overnight bags turned into permanent storage. You got comfortable and settled in on my dime and on my time. You thought my freedom was something to share for your bio and for your timeline. You thought you'd take some souvenirs before your next flight, already fantasizing about other trips late at night. You bragged about all the places you go while leaving your baggage in my bed. Your voice began to be the only echo of chaos in my head. And just when you thought you'd plant your flag on my moon, just when you thought you'd won, I'd already packed your entire existence and told you that it was over, that we were done. Because there was one thing you couldn't predict, something you never knew, that I never unpacked my own bags to settle down with you, because I was an emotional tourist too. That's that one. And this one. Humans love to be martyrs. They glorify their pain and bask in it with no redemption, wear it like a purple heart, a savior complex for everyone but themselves. Some mundane earthly honor, delusions of suffering and sacrifice, their heaven, their reward. Nothing more than the satiation, attention given to their ego. To be the star of the show, the spotlight in every tale, recanting stories of how everyone wronged you, the world so cruel and so unjust, the fair shot you've never been given. It's always someone else's fault and every story sounds the same. Not just yours, theirs too. And the ones of those they tell the stories to, too. But the math doesn't make sense and the numbers aren't adding up. If no one has confessed any wrongs of their own or found any cause for their little place in hell, no sound reasoning for their calamity in life and love, outside of the ones who lie in blame at the tips of their pointing fingers, then are we all the same? And if everyone in every story is the victim, then where are all the villains? And the last piece that I'm going to share with you guys is, it's kind of vague, but it's related to a story that happened to me. You feel cold, heavy steel pressed against the back of your head. I wonder what last thoughts fight to find the surface. What regrets linger? Does your mind scurry to all the things you could have done or all the things you could have said? Before you just fade to black, drowning in what could have been? Or is your last breath a montage of all the little bits of happiness you ever found but took for granted? The last memory in your mind, a notion of a life lived? So that one was a short piece, but yeah, that was my last one.
Well, I'm going. Claps have it. I'm gonna need to run now, Maraja. I'm not reading after that. That's. I mean, I will, but I will. My goodness. The chat room here is exploding. It's moving too fast for me to see all the things. I think Jimmy and Michelle both pointed out that it's kind of amazing that you had both. I think they're referring to there was chaos, heartbreak. You know, it's like you tied up both of their things. I'm not saying I read that in all those things, but you know, I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'll take the credit. So yeah, first of all, great pieces. I'm so glad you agreed to read all of them.
Thanks.
So the first thing, just again, I've always have technical questions. What I love is you know, my brain is getting eaten away. That poem feels like it's written in a blank verse, but then there's a poem about being the tourist, which has much more rhythm and rhyme happening. I wanted to just ask about the choices there and how you think about that, how you think about form, technique, if at all. You know, where does that come from?
So sometimes with form and technique, I try not to get so analytical and get hung up on like semantics and form, because I used to do that a lot, and it kind of took away from my writing. I felt like I wasn't being free, like I wasn't being myself. I was being like writer, like grammar and, you know, Oxford commas, and like, no, just, you know, so I start writing this sentence, and then as it comes to me, it's like, oh, this kind of rhymes with the last line, and then I'll keep doing it, you know, and it'll just keep happening. Or then sometimes I'm just writing my feelings out and it sounds like I'm rambling, or that it's like incoherent nonsense, and then I'll just leave it like that. And I feel like, you know, you either like it or you don't, and it just, you know, so I guess it just kind of happens. It comes out of my head and just figure it out on paper, to be honest.
And I think that's pretty good for maybe other writers to hear, just because, you know, sometimes doing all the analytical stuff when you're younger, or just so you know what it's there, but then you got to let it go and just have your voice, right? Like that's what I find, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I see that on even just on Twitter, since we were talking about social media earlier. With Twitter and like the writer community, it started off as this very welcoming thing, and it often still is. Everybody's so kind and welcoming, but there's also like this little subset of writers Twitter that's very hung up on, like, you know, certain genres aren't real genres, and if you don't write this way, you're not a real writer, and what's up with people using this and that. I'm like, what happened to just like expressing yourself and loving that you even have, you know, the balls to put this on paper and tell other people like, hey, what do you think? You know, it's become so nitpicky. It's like, relax. And we're also in the middle of a pandemic. Calm down. Like, there's other important things to worry about, you know? Like.
Oh, and I had to move my laugh away because I think it's echoing on your side. And then I think it's interesting because the idea that it's not just form and technique, right? One of the poems that you talk about, I'm just bringing it up here, with the cold steel at the back of my neck. You feel the cold, heavy steel press against the back of your head. That one. You talk about how that's from, we talked about it before, how that's from a real life experience. But I also thought you said something really interesting about the way you think about pulling inspiration or ideas from a personal trauma should be used in how the writing works. And you're not super happy with maybe the way it's talked about. And I thought that was amazing. And I just wanted to hear your thoughts.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, I understand that a lot of people like to share their stories and stuff. Like, I would never censor somebody who's been through things that are traumatic and stuff. I personally cannot identify with, I want to find a very correct way of saying this without censoring myself, but also without sounding like I'm condemning anyone else. I think there's a way to write about your own experiences without making it seem like, hey, you should do it too. I went through something really chaotic and traumatic to me, and I kind of thought I was going to lose my life. And I was not only young, but I had a really bad argument with my mom, and I thought it was like, you know, damn, why is this gonna, you know, I just had no reason to be there. I had no business. It was just an awful thing, and I was blaming myself instead of saying that other people are just sorry about that. Sorry, people are just terrible. So when I wrote about it, I wanted to make sure that I was sharing my experience, but not sharing my trauma in such a way that it was like, hey, you can have a second chance too, and trauma is your big because in no way would you ever want to rationalize or glorify that all these horrible people are doing these things and that they are arbitrarily or kind of almost like unconsciously giving you a second chance at anything. They're taking away your autonomy. They're taking away your freedom and your agency. It's not right. But you have survived, and you are in a way getting a second chance at life. And it's trying to figure out how to write about these things, but separating making a very clear distinction between those two, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It can be retroactive. It can become this retroactive myth that said, oh, because you know something changed, it justified the trauma, or the
Yeah,
trauma
no,
becomes
exactly.
becomes this sort
Exactly.
of thing. No, I totally agree. Now, the
Yeah.
other thing too is you write in a fragmented way, and so when we first connected on Twitter, I think the first book of yours I read was Odds and Ends, or part of the right. Um,
Yeah.
and there are some lines I should have written them. Maybe you can. There's some. Those are lines about soup or something. I don't know. I think I wrote something on Twitter. You know what I'm talking
About the
about?
fish poop.
Yeah. What? Can you tell people that line? Do you remember?
I said that fish poop is either like a noun or a very unfortunate sentence. Like if you know, it's like fish poop or fish poop. It's either sitting right there or you're just saying that fish. It's just stupid stuff from my broken, silly little brain. And I feel like maybe people find it funny. So yeah.
I honestly, I thought it was hilarious. And also, what I liked about it was really different than some other. You know, you read what people write and you kind of go through it, and a lot of stuff was it can be very self-serious, and the fact that you could balance like the humor and all the other stuff going on was, I thought, really good. I really liked it. And when you
Thanks.
think about the fragmented nature of things, and this book is obviously called From the Disconnect. That book is fragments. Are all the books like that, or do you kind of go back and forth between regular narrative fragments? Tell the people what you do, basically.
Um, so the first two books, so I have, not to self-promote, but like, so these first two books are like the same thing. One is my original one, and they're all like different fonts because it's disturbing. Like you see it and you're like, why the F is this girl writing in all these different fonts instead of just writing them straight? It's supposed to be about mental illness and love. So you have this very the reality of things. I'm trying to say this in a very like non-neurotypical way, but like the way people look at things to me is completely different from how I'm able to process it. So in writing, it's easier to say that verbally, but when you're writing, it's hard to express that to people who don't know you. So you're able to use your fonts, able to use your expression and fragments and things like that, and you do it way off of format, way off of, like the normal thing that everybody's used to, the sentences and the novel kind of thing. So it's very like broken and fragmented, weird fonts, all that kind of stuff to represent what my brain basically looks like inside. The second one just adds like a whole bunch of like extra like stories to it, and I changed the font. And the reason I changed the font is because I didn't realize that the same way I have different brain patterns, other people have different like visual patterns. And some of the reviews are mentioning like, hey, I love the book, but it is so visually disturbing. Please change. So I did like another version for people that enjoyed the writing, but was saying it's giving me like, a seizure, like, please stop doing that. So yeah. So, but it's just some of them. And then the rest of them are kind of like excerpts from the bathroom floor is about like heartbreaking healing. And it has, it's all the same font, it's straightforward, and they're longer stories that are more cohesive.
Mm-hmm. I think you could have a trigger warning, not trigger, but like a warning that may cause epileptic seizures, this font could cause seizures. That's that's a selling point. That's a dangerous book. So the other thing I wanted to talk about too was, in the social media stuff, the way you have a social media presence is, to my mind, is different than a lot of writers I see. You don't necessarily just put the books out there. You're talking about world travel. You're talking about, I don't know. I mean, if it's okay, I'm curious about your strategy, your philosophy about social media and how it relates to your identity as a writer or your profession as a writer, and how you think about those.
Sure. Yeah. Like on both Instagram and Twitter, I'm a very like, I know it doesn't seem like it, but I'm a very shy person. People can be very cruel and judgmental and harsh, and for the most part I just don't care. So when I'm engaging with people, I want to engage with people that actually want to engage with me. I don't do the follow for follow. I don't want to just say, hey, here's my books, you know that I have books, everybody on there has books. I pin the tweet and then you can look at it, and then the rest of it should be about who I am as a person and how I want to get to know you, and just us interacting back and forth. And then it's just like in real life. I wouldn't come and find a person on the street and say, hey, I have books, and just keep screaming at you. I would talk to you, we would become friends, and then that person tells somebody else, and word of mouth, that kind of thing. I believe in like organic engagement and genuine interaction, on and offline. Who I am behind the screen is the same person, online. So it just happened to be that way. And I'm grateful that people are kind enough to even find me interesting, because I think I'm weird. A little awkward, so, you know.
Well, actually, on that vein, I feel like the stories I've read, or the parts of this I've read too, is it's not just you taking on your own, like, it's not just you, like, I feel like you take on other voices at times too. And I find that kind of interesting. Like, at the beginning of this book, you lay out certain kind of definitions about mental states, but you also say these definitions are not what I'm talking about in a psychiatric journal necessarily. These
Correct.
are, so I feel like you're taking on either different parts of your own way of thinking or different parts of way other people could be thinking. And that kind of, you know, imaginative exercise with biography, I'm just kind of interested in why, how do you think of what is fiction and nonfiction here? How do you take on the other mindsets and voices and points of view?
So I blur the line just a little bit. So in the beginning, for those of you who haven't like seen or read the book, it starts off like, I don't know if everybody can see this clearly, but it starts off with me basically saying like, these are the kinds of like different definitions of things and X, Y, and Z as far as like mental disorders. But the fiction, nonfiction, to answer your question, sorry, I started rambling.
No.
The fiction, nonfiction line is, it's nonfiction when I'm speaking about myself. I personally, I have bipolar disorder. So I identify with a lot of the mood disorders that come with it. I know a lot of people think that bipolar is just like, oh, she's moody, she's bitchy, you know, that kind of thing. But it encompasses so many other brain things that happen, and it's very complicated, a lot of intricate symptoms and stuff like that. The fiction line is crossed when I am mixing little bits and pieces of my experiences with things that didn't happen, and also with things that are describing other people's experiences or perceptions, because as much as I can relate to somebody or empathize, I could never ever say, because you told me something and I understand it or kind of relate, that I've experienced what you've experienced. I call it fiction in that sense because I would never want to take someone's personal experience and say, you know, it's mine too, because it's so similar. You know, first of all, I would never listen to somebody and then make it about me. But then also when you're writing, you need to make sure that people don't think that, I think it's really important as a writer that your friends and people around you, or even people you work with, or whoever is telling your stories or just relating to you as a person, does not feel like a specimen or an experiment or your next writing project, you know? So I try to keep things, I blur the line a lot, but I also try to make sure that it's very clear that I'm not, you know, I'm not trying to offend anybody or define them in any kind of way. Like even with the DSM, the mental disorder things that are put in psychology books, they're so outdated. You know, there's so many things that have changed with mental disorders, and I just think that a lot of people are misunderstood. A lot of terms are taken for granted and used too loosely. It's just, you know, so it's hard putting it into a book sometimes, and then sometimes it comes easy to me because it is a lived experience. It's who I am.
Well, I really like the also the sound. I think I sound like a monster when I come out of your computer. Just I think that's what that is. I really like the tension and conflict that creates in this particular book. I think I can feel that wanting to say something and not overstep, but not censor yourself, and embrace an ambiguity, but not say anything, because ambiguity can just sort of make us be quiet. There's a really great sense of drive there. I'm gonna just I'm just gonna open up also for any questions for other people. I know there's a lot of things being written in the chats that are really, really interesting. I'm just gonna quote a few. Jimi Rodriguez, blurring the line between fiction and nonfiction is a great way for people to learn something new without feeling intimidated by the nonfiction label. Owen says, I think everyone is weird in a way, LOL. So far, MJ, your weird is cool. Greg Valencia, weird brains rock. Yeah, a lot of good stuff here. It blew up down there. Yeah, does anybody, if anybody wants to put up the blue hand or just raise their hand, I think I can see if they have any questions or anything. Just hello.
Hi,
Hello.
I'm CJ.
Hello, CJ.
I had to come in through another account because my Zoom wasn't working. But my question was for MJ. I just absolutely loved her prose about emotional tourism. And I wanted to know, coming from your bipolar background, do you ever feel like you're divulging too much vulnerability in your writing? And do you ever like keep, like write something and then take it back and be like, no, this is not for the world. This is just for me.
CJ, you have no idea how many times I've done that. I often feel like I'm oversharing. And then also because it's going to be public, I also consider the fact that I have a very private family. So, you know, I mean, you just know how families are. Sometimes they know who I am as a person. They know how I am verbally and how I am with my friends and stuff, but it doesn't mean that they want every fragment of my life in a book, you know? So I try to consider the fact that, like, I'm not just representing myself. Sometimes I'm also representing other people that, you know. So I kind of, another blurred line, I do take back things sometimes, but again, I'm also just who I am. I try not to censor myself too much. So
CJ,
so other people can relate.
yeah, CJ, you still, I haven't muted you yet. You can still chat. You connected us, so you get to talk as long as you want. You have the floor.
I'm so happy. This is like my dream. This is my dream come true. John, Jimmy, and MJ in like one spot. And I was trying to come in earlier. I was like, no, I missed it. And then I was like, no, I didn't miss it. It's CST. And now I'm like, okay, I missed it. I totally missed Jimmy, I think, which I feel so sad about. But yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask also about the emotional turmoil that you said you experienced from, you know, your family and the stress from that, because I also deal with and have dealt with in the past a lot of familial dysfunction. So do you feel like that ever really, I would say, pollutes the writing sometime, where you just kind of have to take your emotions out of it? Because that's what, with my work in progress right now, that's something that I'm struggling with at present.
Yeah. So sorry, just thinking about how to say this. I'm very private when it comes to my parents because I love them so much. It's the kind of thing where, yeah, it sometimes dysfunction has like, it has its weird points. So I feel like people are just who they are. If I had a kid right now, I would just be winging it. And I feel like I need to remember that about parents and other people and stuff like that. Everybody's just doing the best they can, you know, when they have good intentions and also when they love and care for you. So I don't try to put personal things about my family, and this is where the fiction part comes in. I don't try to put personal things about my family in my writing because that is something sacred between us. You know what I mean? And I also know that mistakes can be made and I can forgive them and stuff. But I think that writing is something that is like eternal. You know, it doesn't matter if I decide to take a book off the shelf today, somebody else could find it printed or published somewhere else. I would never want to, in the heat of a moment or a broken heart from somebody that did something to me, including a parent, put something in a book out of, you know, emotional, you know, whatever, and then I can't take it back. You know, feelings are fleeting. And again, just understanding that people are just people and, you know, whatever. I don't know. I try to just make sure that and that's a good thing about drafts also, putting them on paper and setting them aside, letting it sit with yourself for a while before you decide, all right, I'm putting this out into the world for everybody to judge, because they're not just judging me, you know, just like how you asked the question about my family. It does make you curious about where did this person come from, who raised them, who's been supporting them or not supporting them, you know? So, yeah. You know, I keep people that I love and close to me very protected, you know? Yeah.
That's a great answer, MJ.
I'm gonna bring CJ. I'm not gonna mute you. You're gonna be able to keep chatting if you like. I'm also gonna unmute Michelle, who had her hand raised. So one sec here, and there we go. So you just have to. I think I'm yeah.
Yeah, CJ. I think you missed my thing, but like my whole, just to answer your question, even though you asked MJ. I just want to be part of this conversation because, like, I wrote a memoir, but it's like a narrative memoir, right? So it feels like they're characters, but they're also real people, and like, it's one of those things I had to be very careful about. Like, what are the things I can say about people who are either not in my life anymore or are still in my life? And it was, you know, I tried all the time to keep it centered on my experience of a thing and the impact of something, rather than a play-by-play of like, this happened, then he said this, and I said this. And like, you know, there's some of that, but more to never presume that I know the motivation of that person, because there actually aren't a character in a fiction book when you're writing, you know, if you're choosing to write what's real. So I always made sure, and I think that is why, like, you know, if a lot of people could say like, oh, she wrote a book about, you know, infidelity, then it must be like, just like anti, like husband and digging up the dirt and all this kind of stuff. But in fact, you know, most people, including him, would say that like, it's not like that at all, right? You know what I mean? And the way that I was able to tell an entire story about someone who I love and who is like my kid's father is to like, you know, present him as the human being that he is, right? Without trying to guess at his motivation or guess at what he's thinking. And like the other woman, for example, is never in the book. So some things I choose not to put. Sometimes you choose which stories, and then you have to think very carefully at about what you say, if you choose to say it. But I like totally respect MJ, like not writing about your parents. Like I never write about my mother, for example, like very rarely. And, you know, but there's tons of stories about my dad. My dad is funnier. He's less contentious. You know, he gives me a lot more like material, right? Where even my mother, it's like very difficult. It would be another fucking 5 books, right? Like, you know, just about my mother. So like, she just doesn't exist in my books.
Yeah.
And that's like the choice I made. Yeah, but it's hard. I mean, the thing you have to do is just remember that people are living
Our people.
humans that in your life, and not characters, like even though they're characters.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's tough. It's tough. And my
Wow,
child is
that's
so private, like you were saying, your family, like my kid, right? Like not only is it about her life, but it's also about her parents' life, and both of her parents acting badly. Like there's a lot of messy, you know, to Jimmy's point earlier, like bad parts of me in this book, and like me doing stupid things and like embarrassing things, or things that maybe I wouldn't want my teenage daughter to read now that she's a teenager. But it shows them that we are humans, right? Like human beings are fallible. And so it's like how we choose to present that fallibility with still empathy and care. That was a super long answer. I'm sorry. I just really care about that question so much.
That was a great answer. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Okay, great. Oh, thank you.
CJ, you're so pretty. Oh my gosh, she's my birthday twin. I'm so glad you guys
Yes, your
brought her
birthday
on here.
twin.
I'm so excited.
You're so pretty. I'm sorry. This is just going to turn into a fangirl session between me and MJ, and basically me and everyone out here. I just love all of you so much.
Bask writers, bask in the fandom. All right. Okay. Well, I will keep this. I will be a good host and keep this stuff moving. Amy, thank you so much. Amazing, amazing questions. I'm really so. CJ, thank you so much. I'm just looking at.
I was like, who?
Who's Amy? Thank you so much, CJ. That was really awesome. MJ, that was amazing. Michelle, thank you. Jimmy in the chats there, thank you so much. Okay,